Good morning, Mike. How's things down in Florida?
Oh, good morning, Dave. Things are great down here. The weather is changing up north. It's pretty nice to be out here in the sunshine.
Lucky dog. All right. Well, hey, I had a question for you that came up recently, and it dealt with what seems to be the scenario up there on your weatherboard, ironically enough, is that, for boats coming in overstood, how do you deal with boats coming on the port ley line? What's the best way to go around this mark?
Yeah, so we're talking about the windward mark here and coming in on starboard. And if you're the one coming in on starboard, how do you make this play against this boat coming in on port, particularly if you're already overstood a little bit? So what are your options? Is that's what you're kind of asking here?
Exactly.
I like this question because I do find that this is potentially one of the most abused rules in the book here. When somebody's coming on the mark and they just can't help themselves and they have to tack in here. And I think there's a couple problems. One is it's really hard to judge what the 3 boat length zone is. So all this really takes place, most of the foul happens in the 3 boat length zone, and whether you're there or not, it's just sort of almost a matter of opinion. So that, and it's awful tempting if you're that port boat and there's a huge line of starboard tackers, take some big ducks. And you might not want to do that. So it's tempting to jam it in there. But I think the short answer is that you have to shut the door. So if you're coming in here, we're the starboard boat here. Let me get that backwards. We'll make this the starboard boat. You're the starboard boat here. And let's just say you're overstood just a little bit here. And this guy could potentially lay it up and tack in there. And there's a bunch of rules that make that hard on that port tacker. But there's a few things that the starboard tacker too can make that even harder. Use those rules to your advantage. So the short answer is you want to close this door and suppose you're way overstood, and this is your ley line right here. And if you're overstood, maybe you've left the boat length in here, and you want to get rid of that boat length if you think there's going to be a problem here. It's nice to have that little buffer zone, but as you're coming in, and if this person's going to tack in there, if you leave that boat length, they could potentially pull that off. So what I do is I head down and I get on this ley line. So that's the first thing I do. And the second thing I do is I over communicate. Awful tempting for this person to try to make it in there. It's a hard judgment call for them to know if you're on ley line or not, or if you're overstood. So if I bear off and I get on this ley line, I'm going to let them know. I'm going to say, I'm on ley line. I'm on a tight ley line. Don't tack in there. Don't tack in there. Don't tack in there. Don't even think about it. All those things that we kind of yell out to sort of make people know. And I think you need to do this before they've committed in their mind. So somewhere out here, they're like, can I do it? Can I do it? And right then, I got to do this early. I got to see them coming. And I got to close this door as they're coming in and communicate that I've done that. Because if their last snapshot was here, they saw me here, they're like, oh, they're way overstood. And they get it in their mind, they're going to do it. It's like right around here, their emotions taking over. And if they've already made that decision, it's really hard for them to pull out. And it may become impossible for them to duck at some point. So they need to know pretty early from me. And it's hard because you're pretty far away.
This is all happening inside the zone, correct?
Yeah, this is all happening inside the zone, but not necessarily. So I think there's two thoughts I have. One is that, anytime anywhere near this zone, this starts to happen. But some of the rules apply even before you get to the zone. So this is a good time to talk about the two relevant rules here. And this is, I think, one of the misconceptions. One is just plain open course. Doesn't matter if there's a mark there or not. This guy can't tack too close to this guy. So the port tacker is the giveaway boat here. And then they start their tack as soon as they pass head to wind. They finish their tack when they're on the close salt course. And then they still need rule 16 to apply, which is you can't gain the right of way. And then, the boat, the the right-of-way boat still has to have time. The original right-of-way boat, now the giveaway boat, has to have time to go react. So there's kind of three rules going against tacking too close. So independent of what the rules are in the zone, this is still the case. So a lot of times somebody will tack too close and they're like, but I wasn't in the 3 boat lane zone. Like, but you're still tacked too close. You can't do that. So then the second rule that applies is rule 18.3, I think it is, which says when the port-tack, if a port-tacker does tack inside a boat, they can't then make this boat go above close hauled. So if they tack so close and then they have to pinch up to the mark and they have to go above close hauled, then this person can cry foul. And then there's one other piece to it, is if they tack in here and then you overlap inside them, then they still have to give you room. So there's a lot of burdens against this boat on port tacking in there. A lot of things that they have to satisfy to make it happen. Me, when I'm on port, I almost always take the high road. If I'm not 100% sure, I'll either cross or dock and not jam it in there. And people are still emotional about it when I do that, right? Like it's an emotional part of the race because there's so much to be gained or lost.
And I think is it true that also I think is the further the the ley line, further out you're on the ley line, we get these gigantic or long starboard parades, and that the opportunities for the port tacks are better the further down the course you get to safely set up on that ley line.
Yeah, so if we zoom out here, let's just take these boats out of the picture. And, let's just say the 3 boat lane zone is here. When you're out here and everybody's overstood, they're all kind of coming in at different angles, right? And then as you get here, it's just the cone tightens up. Everybody's merging and, kind of like zippering in on when your lane ends in the highway, right? Everybody kind of finds their spot. So here, if you're on port, you could probably bob and weave and find a place to get in there. The closer you get, the harder it is to make that happen. So like if I'm the port guy, I'm trying not to be in this zone. And in fact, I kind of have this imaginary 5 boat. I always call it the 5 boat lane zone that I'm trying to get out of. And there's 2 reasons I want to be on that 5 boat lane zone. Is that one is that, the starboard tacker doesn't know where the 3 boat lane zone either is, and neither do I. So once you get the 5 boat, you probably could agree on it. But 3 boats, is it 3 1/4 or is it 2.75? It's debatable. So, but the other thing is just what you said, as they're merging in, I find once you get to by the time you get to the 3 boat lane zone, if it's crowded, there could be no lanes left. 5 and more, there's probably somewhere to go.
So within that time and space, is there a sort of the best time to really work hard to close the door versus too soon or too late?
That's another great question. Yeah, so there's problems with both, right? If you do it too soon, if you're having trouble laying, or if you get a little header or somebody tacks on you, maybe you don't make it. So you don't want to give that up too soon. But let's go back to this 3 boat lane zone for ours. So the short answer is somewhere right around that same 5 boat lane zone is when I'm doing that, or when I see them coming, right? So if this is the ley line and this port-tack boat is coming in really close, I can wait a little longer. But the bottom line is I have an obligation too, not to close the door in a way that they can't avoid me anymore. So if I wait too long and I'm here and all of a sudden I see them coming and I bear way off and all of a sudden they have to do a crash tack, I can't then cry foul. So I need to do this a couple boat lengths, boat length and a half, at least 1 or more boat lengths from when I see them about to tack. I need to be done with this when they're a boat length away. And part of it's for the rules. And the other part's that emotional part we talked about before. If I do it too late, these guys have already mentally committed and they're going to stick it in there anyway. They already made that decision. Now they're executing. You got to get them before they made that mental decision.
It's going to be worse. So now let's say there's umpires, just to sort of let's put ourselves on the starboard tack boat's position that,
Yeah.
and there's umpires, there's officials watching at these weather mark roundings, as always. Is there a way to sort of just subtly make your point with a, assuming you do have to do a little luff to make sure that there's some break in the jib or something that sort of like it's clear that you've gone head to wind or past head to wind?
Yeah, so the pass head to wind is a bit of a judgment call too. Again, you could be, if it's a little windier, maybe you're already feathering, so that maybe there's already a little bubble in the jib, and so there's a judgment call here. And whether there's umpires there or not, I might say the same thing to build a case for myself. And building the case either for a potential protest, but also so that the port tacker really knows that you've sort of done your homework here. So what I'll say is, don't tack in there. I'm on ley line. I'll yell that as pretty loudly. And if they choose to do it anyway, I said, I'm having to head up. You haven't finished your tack, or whatever the relevant move is. So that would be tacking too close. Or I say, my jib is luffing, and I'll point to it. See, my jib is luffing, and maybe an umpire will see that, and maybe this boat will see it too. I'm like, oh, yeah, we kind of screwed up. Because certainly somebody said that to me, and I glanced over. I'm like, yeah. I didn't do that right. I'm like, my bad. But if you don't say that and they're just focused on finishing their tack and then trying to make the mark, they may not even look. So whether it's an umpire or not, I will do that. I've done a bunch of regattas when they do umpire this, supposedly. If they hear the word protest, they're willing to make a call on the spot. And I find that they're very hesitant to. I think it's very hard for them to see too. I think there's a lot of judgment call here.
Especially when there's a lot of chaos happening, these chase 70 roundings and such. And though, speaking of on the 70s, something we see a lot of that you mentioned earlier about communicating clearly to the boat, preferably would that be somebody else other than the person driving? The reason I say that is we see this a lot where, as soon as you duck your head onto the boom or with the wheel or whatever, the natural tendency, like a car, is to kind of keep turning left. And now you're making the problem worse. But anyway, having somebody in the middle of the boat, tactician, or whatever, being the voice of the boat, not the guy driving.
Absolutely. And I think with that, only one person, there's nothing worse than three people on a 5-person boat, three of them yelling. It's super confusing. I think that the person that yells had better be pretty clear and know what they're saying and empowered to do it. So if it's not the tactician, maybe it's a bow person, because they're right there and they can catch somebody's eye. But to your point, yes, I think I'd rather it wasn't the driver in the perfect world, because you can only focus on one thing at once and you're trying to execute. But then one person clearly stating these things is very important.
Okay, so final two questions. What is the scenario different if there's an offset leg or you want to set up for a jibe set and have a clean exit?
Yeah, and this brings up another point. Sometimes I take it one more step and I actually tell in the communication, and I tell the port tacker what I'd like them to do. So this is a great example. They're coming in, I'm right on ley line, and they're tempted to tack here. But if they do, they're gonna tack here, and then I'm gonna have to either go below them or head above close haul. And a perfectly viable option to do is to let them cross. So I'll say cross, cross, cross. And they'll be like, well, that's a better option, whether they could make it or not. Like maybe they're just barely making it. And I just affirm to them, I'd rather have you go and then tack above me. And then everybody's happy, right? Than to tack right here and follow me. And so they'd rather have that too. But sometimes I do that based on what I want to do. So if I want to jibe right away, I want that inside. I might say, cross, 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 and they'll do that. And a good sailor would take me up on it instead of taking that risk. And then if I wanted to continue, I might just say, I might even tell them, knowing that this scenario is that they're going to be up here on me and I won't be able to continue. And maybe I'll say, go ahead, tack in there. I'll even let them in there. And therefore I control my own destiny. I get here and I get this lane out here that I wanted.
Yeah. So you don't always want to shut the door. It's sort of a, next move condition, I guess.
Yeah, I think you don't always want to. You usually want to. You know, it's not a good position. It's not a strong position if you're this port-tack boat. So more often than not, you want to shut this door. You want to shut it early, communicate clearly, and then if it gets even closer, you know, you got to communicate louder and clearer as you get going.
Okay. And then I guess the final question, so we don't drag this out too long, and I know you could look at a million different scenarios, but if you were the port-tack boat, maybe just explain real quick what the smart thought process would be going into inside the zone.
Yeah. So my first thought is avoid the zone, because unless you're sure that it's really low density and you sort of see where to go, you know, this is super risky. Super risky. And you know, usually it's a gain of a little at this point and the loss could be massive. So, but the second thought is once you're there, you know, I think, you know, communicating here, can I cross? If this person's smart, they'll be like, well, I'd rather have them cross than even take that chance. Because even if I do foul them, it could be, you know, so what, you're right, you're still going slow. So, you know, maybe they'll let me through. The other thing is to, you know, I take the high road here a lot. I think this is super risky for one spot, you know, risking 1 point for really making some people angry and not making friends out there, having to do circles and hitting the mark. But so I often duck and I duck early. I want these guys to know that I'm ducking, and you know, I don't want to slow them up anymore by them trying to even close the door on me even more. Bob and weave a little bit here, back in. You know, at 3 boat lengths, you're not going to lose a lot. You know, I think this is a good place when you're the port-tacker to be willing to give up a point or two. Even though I hate to do it, it's better than the alternative.
I can believe it. All right. Well, thank you, Mike. Let's go out and practice that in real time. I get your sunfish sailing down in Sarasota and
yeah, this something like a sunfish is great. We get a lot of starts and a lot of winter mark roundings, so we get to try this a lot.
Excellent.
And when we're doing it, I tell you, this thing where you're shutting the door early enough for this person is really comes into play a lot. If you do it too late, you know, you're burdened too, because you're changing your course as the right-of-way boat.
There you go. So do it early and be clear about your intentions. Kind of the way through it.
If you had to oversimplify everything, shut the door early and communicate hard.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Mike. Have a great day. We'll catch you next time. I always appreciate the insights.
Thanks. Yeah.